guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, if you are feeling burnt out, if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling like you don't know how to communicate with your children, your significant other, this episode is for you. Me and my brother Jim, we've been friends for a long time. And we always said we're going to get together. Well, today we finally decided to get together. So make sure you guys hang out. And if you stay to the end, I'm going to be dropping something new that nobody knows about. Only you guys are going to be the first ones to know. So make sure you stay to the end. Jim, my brother, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, sir.
How are you doing today?
I am doing better than I deserve. We'll start with that.
I love that. And brother, I just want to say thank you for having me on your show. That panel we had with David was awesome. That was so much fun. So I just want to say thank you for having me on your amazing show.
Oh, man, it was a pleasure. It was such a great conversation around mental health. And it was our first panel. It was the first panel that I did. And I was very excited for that. So, yeah, man, anytime.
All right. So first question right out the gate. What is your definition of resiliency?
Resiliency, and I like to make things simplified. So resiliency is the ability to get up once you're knocked down. And then if you want to add to that, the ability to keep getting back up every time you get knocked down.
So it's kind of like the Rocky thing. You get that knocked down 7, you get back up 8.
Yep, that's exactly what it is.
Okay. So give us a little background. Let's hop in the Wayback Machine. Let's get into the DeLorean. Let's go back. Where do you come from? Where'd you grow up? And how did you become the man that you are today?
Oh, what great question. So it's so funny that you chose Rocky as your illustration there, because I am actually from Philadelphia originally. I am currently in Orlando, but I am originally from Philly. I grew up very tumultuous, a lot of different challenges, a lot of different things I went through. I ran from all of that, joined the military, got out of the military, ended up going back to college, got my undergraduate in Christian ministries, my postgraduate in leadership, master's degree in leadership, ended up pastoring for 15 years, ended up teaching special needs students for 10 of those. And, in through all of that, been married for 25. And so in through all of that has been weaved this beautiful story of just me trying to make my life better so that I can make others better. And so leadership became the tool or the avenue or road that I chose that says, hey, if I can help people be developed to be not the best version of themselves, but the healthiest version of themselves in the midst of it, then the world will be a better place one by one, as much as I can do.
Okay, so growing up, I'm in Jersey, so we're not too far away, just down the pike. Growing up in Philly, it's a different lifestyle.
It is,
and we kind of grew up kind of hard, a little rough around the edges. So, what made you want to join the military?
So I ran from my situation. I was in a place, I was 19, maybe 20 years old, and I was in college, but at the time my sister had a brain tumor, so we almost lost her. My mom's and my relationship wasn't very good. And then I had lived growing up just with this constant needing to fight, working through all the gangs in the neighborhood, trying not to die, different things like that. And I realized that my life and my trajectory of my life was never going to be more than what it was unless I did something drastic. So I said, you know what? I looked up online. I said, let me find some way to get out of this. Military was the option. And I chose the Coast Guard. So I am a prior Coastie and my reasoning was I've seen enough death in my life growing up where I did. I wanted to learn how to save people. So I joined the Coast Guard with the intention of learning more in the medics and more into the field of helping people.
Well, first of all, I want to give you a big round of applause. You're the first Coast Guard personnel I've ever had on the show. So
nice.
This is good. Yeah, you're it, brother.
All
you
right.
are the man. So what was it like going through, I don't know what they call it, basic training, and what was your experience like in the Coast Guard?
Yeah, so basic training or boot camp is the same as they call it for all of them. And it was interesting because most people think, well, you guys are just coasties. Well, what you may not realize is that all the Coast Guard boot camp people are all prior Marines. and they were all prior Marine boot camp runners. So when they left the Marines boot camps, they would come over to the Coast Guard boot camp and run ours. So basically, they were enlisted Coast Guard, but they were all prior Marines. So our boot camp was hard. It was interesting, and because it wasn't a cupcake walk. Um, but you know what made it even more difficult? I was a punk kid out of Philadelphia coming in thinking I ran the show, and then you get these guys and you realize real fast that you don't run the show, and I didn't know whether I wanted to fight or run or what happened, but at the end of it, I made it through and we did our time.
So, what was your job in the Coast Guard?
I was actually first 2 years I was stationed on a ship. I was on a medium endurance cutter and I actually was striking to be a machinist. So I would work with all the, the machines, and we actually, interesting enough, we were underway one time and our engines broke down. So I got opportunities to do really cool stuff like work on the Alcos, which were like basically locomotive engines. Like one piston was 100 pounds. Like this was cool stuff. So I did that for a couple of years, and then when my school opened, I became a marine science technician, which was, Coast Guard speak for, we did pollution investigation, barge inspections, facility inspections, things along those lines, and then cleanups when they did happen.
And I got to say, I love that because my son just graduated from Coastal Carolina as a marine scientist. So I think that's freaking cool.
Mhm.
How many years did you do in the Coast Guard?
I only did a little over 4. So I thought about staying longer, but I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do in life. During that 4 years, interesting, punk kid from Philly, got the chance to, we actually were sent to we were the first Coast Guard boat to go in a wartime situation in like 50, 60 years. So we were over in the Kosovo-Albania conflict and we did interdictions over there. And then from there, we traveled all over Europe, all over South Africa, and then we came home. But yeah, so we were in a wartime situation. And quite after that, and after some 2002, 2003, I decided it was time. And I went out to kind of do my own thing.
Okay. Now, because I have a lot of veterans on my show and I'm a retired veteran, but like Sergeant Nick talks about in our group, Sergeant Nick Valentine, that once you step off the boat or once you step off base, the military doesn't give a shit about you. Excuse my language.
Right.
They don't care about you. Your phone stops ringing. You don't have the camaraderie. You don't have the money because a lot of us, we don't finish the whole 20. So what was your expectations like when you got out? And what was your experience like when you got out?
So I really didn't hold expectations because, again, I was still young. I mean, I was in my early 20s, mid 20s, and I was like, you know what, whatever's going to come is going to come, because I'm a free spirit. So I kind of just roll with the punches. And the only thing I expected was to at least have something that transferred over into a real job when I got out, and I didn't, because at the time, I had only had my associates done. I didn't finish my full 4 years degree. Had I finished my 4-year degree by the time I got out, I could have easily went and worked for the EPA. But I didn't. So I missed that opportunity. And because I missed that opportunity, it was basically just getting back into life, doing odd and end jobs. I worked for Home Depot for a while and ended up finishing my degree. So that's kind of where it went.
All right. So normally I ask this later in the interview, but since we're here, let's go. I tell everybody that joins the military, if they're thinking about it, I tell them start thinking about your end of your career before you even start. Because anybody that I've spoken to, successful in business or the military, have thought about the end game before they start. So, what would you tell somebody if they're looking to say, "Hey, Jim, listen, I'm looking to join the Coast Guard, do a couple years." What would be some of your advice that you would give to that person? Because most people don't realize, they don't think about, there's no coastie that's 85 years old still on a boat. So eventually you're going to have to hang your gear up. So what would you tell that person that's looking to get in?
So I have 2 pieces of advice. One of them, again, is the begin with the end in mind, Stephen Covey, which is what you're mentioning. Like, always have the end game. always prepare your exit strategy. So when you're going into something, make sure you have an exit strategy, because the more you have the exit strategy, the easier the transition will be. And the reason why we have so many people who are struggling, anxious, is because they don't have an exit strategy, because they never thought of one. So begin with the end in mind. The second thing is, and what I have shared with people is, and this comes from the Bible, it's called count the cost. Jesus says, count the cost. Before you even get into something, count the cost. And I think there's a lot of us that do or join things because it sounds like a good idea, but we never truly count what it's going to cost us, whether it be now or long term. For instance, like, even though I was in for a short period of time, and because I was on the boat, my legs got screwed up. And so now I am permanently with damage on my legs that it's only progressively getting worse, right? But I never counted the cost. My whole purpose was joining was to get away from something. So I was running. I had no end in mind. I had no count of the costs. Matter of fact, when I joined, I wasn't even a Christian. But those are the two pieces of advice. Always have the exit strategy, whatever you do, but weigh the cost of it. And if the cost is something you're willing to pay because the benefits are better, then join. But if you find that it's not worth it in your mind or in your heart, then find something equivalent or something else to do that is going to actually be a better deal for you after you count the cost.
I've done, I think we're up to like 1,400 interviews. That's the first time I've ever heard it put that way. And it makes a lot of sense, because most people, if you ask a lot of lifers, if you'd ask them, is it worth the cost? Most of them would say no. But if I asked them, would you do it again? They'd say, hell yeah.
Yep.
So, especially with our mental health. And that's something that I struggle with, PTSD and a traumatic brain injury. So now you came out with your legs hurting. And we've talked about struggling with mental health issues, but
right,
it doesn't sound like it was military related. So how did you come out struggling with mental health issues?
So I had multiple different things. So I came out with both physical and mental, but the mental health was also something that was starting to develop in my childhood. So I'm actually diagnosed with CPTSD, which is complex PTSD, which is, lifelong stuff of trauma and things I went through. And this was the result of childhood trauma, teenage trauma, the trauma I had while I was in the military. Which, part of that was being in the wartime situation. Part of that was I went to a base or a unit where my commander of the unit kept trying to fight me every day, like literally physically fight me. For some reason, he didn't like me. And I kept wanting to fight him, but if it wasn't for my bosun mate, I would have probably been dishonorable discharged. So you're living under this level of stress and the scrutiny at constant times. So that put me into a depression. And actually, in addition, I'm diagnosed with dysthymia, which is high functioning depression, which is based on all the things. But so coming out, it was you're conditioned a certain way to think a certain way and to accept certain things. And so when you have somebody who grew up in a traumatic type of life, and then you get into the military and you're told, hey, just suck it up, keep moving on, it basically confirms everything that you grew up with. And so for me, it intensified what I had already been dealing with, because it was basically confirmation bias. So I'm getting more intense on what I believe. So it's becoming stronger in my belief there. It was a wrong belief. Whereas somebody like my wife had something that happened in the military where she was diagnosed with PTSD because of a situational thing. Mine was the interaction with people that really deepened the actual things that I had been dealing with.
Okay, because now the only reason why I'm asking is because, I believe, now I'm not a doctor. Obviously, I'm a ninth grade dropout. So take people that are listening, I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling you what to do. But I find now, like I said, I've had over 1,300 interviews with doctors. I'm taking actually courses on cognitive behavioral therapy. So, but I've found out that usually when an adult acts out, it's because something that happened between the ages of 3 and 13.
Yes.
And then you add military to the mix. You add war to the mix sometimes. Mm-hmm. Then you add alcohol or drugs to the mix.
Hmm.
and it becomes like a perfect storm.
Oh, it does. Yep.
And nobody can really tell you how to get out of the perfect storm unless they've been there and done that. Kind
Right.
of like me and you. We can reach down and say, hey, buddy, I got you. I've been there. I've done that. I'll take the bullets for you until you can get healthy enough.
Hmm.
So how long did you, after you got out, did you start saying, hey, I'm, I'm not right. Something ain't right and I need help?
That's an interesting question because when I first got out, I was still conditioned to ignore. And so like it was like I feel these things, but I'm not going to deal with these things because they're not going to slow me down. You get into all these, like, you get out there with a lot of these motivational speakers and they're like, just keep moving. Well, there comes a time in your life where just keep moving is not an option. And so that hit me because I had, like, fast forward it maybe 6 years later. All right. I'm out. I'm now now a Christian. I started a church, so that's a whole other level of complexity with people and stuff. My wife is diagnosed with mental illness, and I was working as a teacher. And so now it came to this complexity, and I just did a previous interview about burnout. It became functional burnout in the midst of it. And so I started hitting walls. And I'm like, why am I hitting these? Why is this? I'm not, and it was that military mentality. I'm not supposed to feel this. Pick yourself up, move forward. Until one day I just sat down. I'm like, there's something not right with me. Like, I can feel it. My body is starting to deteriorate. I'm more and more depressed. I'm like, what is going on? And that's when I started seeking help.
Right. So, but one thing, and I try to talk to people and veterans, and I tell them we need to get back to sometimes having that warrior mentality.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is not all the hua hua shit, but whenever we were on base and we were in the military and they gave us leave, we're out the door. We're going
Right.
somewhere. We're doing something.
Yep.
And once we hit civilian life, we kind of forget to take that 30 days paid, or like for me this year, I plan on working only 180 days, but I plan on going balls to the wall for 180 days and then taking off the rest of the time.
I love that.
Because we can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
And in the military, once we knew, hey, we got leave for the weekend, the barracks was empty. There was nobody in the barracks. We went out and we did stuff. And I think it's important for us to start, if you're going to work hard, to start playing hard too.
I 100% agree with that. My gosh. Yeah. I think the challenge is I love the warrior mentality. And the reason being, like a lot of things you're saying, right? I love the warrior mentality. Where I struggle with it is when we focus so much on being the warrior that we ignore the health. That's where I struggle the most with it, because I don't think we should ever ignore any type of health, physical, emotional, mental, relational health. And sometimes we get into this unhealthy mindset that says, keep pushing, keep pushing, keep doing. And I love what you said. I do think we need to bring that back, is fight hard, pray hard. And when we fight hard, it should be an additional fight for your mental health, fight for your relational health, fight for everything else like that as well, and then go out and play.
Yeah, like even like my friend Stephen Eugene Kuhn, and Lane Malone wrote in their book The Humble Alpha. You have to be humble if you're going to be an alpha male. You have to be humble about it, because if something is off, whether it's physical, like you just said, physical, mentally, spiritually, financially, physically, if one of them is off, the rest of them are going to be off somehow.
Yeah.
And I think like a lot of us, we're just like, hua, 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 kind of like when we're doing PT, we're going to run and run and run until we get hurt and splint shins and we can't run anymore. And then we're like, well, I can't run anymore. And we keep repeating the cycle.
Right.
So I think it's time to, say, okay, I need to take this time for my mental health, this time for my physical health, this time for my financial health, and this time for my relational health. Because what good is it? And I tell everybody, what good is it to have a big house, big car, the big boat, and you're sitting at the kitchen table alone because you didn't take care of your relational health. So talk about Talk about being healthy in all aspects of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like so let's just think of a mindset. Like some of the mindset is if I focus on my physical health, then everything else will be fine, right? Because I can see like the results of physical fitness. I can get out there, I can work out, I can lose weight, I can do that. I see those things. Well, here's the challenge. Most will focus on what they can see, not what's driving what they see. And underneath of us, we have things that are drivers. We have our mental health, we have our emotional health, we have our relational health. And those three things are key because if those are out of balance, our life is out of balance. So it doesn't matter how nice and jacked you look. It doesn't matter how physically fit you are. If you're still in a place of with your mental health where you're trying to take your life, you can be the most physically fit in the world, but if you're still struggling with the deep inner seated things that trauma has developed, they're going to come up time where it's going to be dealt with or it will deal with you. And I think this is where the trouble becomes because we will work on the thing we can see and ignore the things we can't until we can no longer ignore. But if we talk about healthy people do healthy things. And so we don't ignore problems, we acknowledge, we accept, and then we take action, right? Acknowledge, accept, and take action. 3 A's, triple A's right there. And so we acknowledge that there's a problem. We accept that there's a problem. Now, what do I need to take action on? And that could be going to a therapist. That could be going to church. That could be doing things. If you're having relational struggles, get around people to be in relationship so you can practice. A lot of this is practice. And then go to people who are professionals who can help you deal with the things that are deep-seated beliefs and things that you may not be able to get over by yourself or with a friend. And they've got like therapists have tools that we can use in order to help us get beyond these things. But if you're going to be the most healthiest in your life, because I think, and if you've heard me on any of my shows or any things I do, I've actually thrown away, stop being the best version of yourself because people can't even define what the best version of themselves is because they have no idea what identity they are. They have no idea what that even looks like. So they're trying to shoot for an ideal that is unmeasurable. But be the healthiest version of yourself because you can measure things. What there's a relationship, what relational health, what is physical, mental, emotional, what does that look like? And you can measure those things. So to come back full circle and answer your question, Richard, is focus on the whole person to be the healthiest version of yourself so that you can live in a place of thriving and not just limping and surviving.
And I agree 1,000%. But also I realize there has to be there's a reason why most of your high performers, most of your top paid CEOs, they put their health, their top three are like health, spiritual, and family, and financial is way down here because most people that I see that are successful, they're not 60, 80 pounds overweight. And a lot of them say, well, I work out, like I'm a big fan of Patrick David, Ed Milet, Tony Robbins, but they say I work out, but while I'm working out, I'm also working out my mind because I'm either listening to the Bible, or I'm listening to podcasts, or I'm listening to book, Audible. So they put their physical health at the top of the list because I heard somebody say, without health, there is no wealth.
Correct.
We'll talk about how important it really is to have a long-term life where you can enjoy what you're working on. What good is it to have everything and then die, and then your wife's boyfriend is going to enjoy it.
That's it. I mean, isn't it challenging to think that our civilization, at least the Western civilization, is trained to work their whole life to enjoy it for 10 years that's left once they retire, or however many years that is? Like, if you think about that, that's crazy to me. Like, so I'm going to work 65, 67 years, and then I'm only going to enjoy it maybe 10. Like, that just blows my mind. And I think, like, when we get into these things and we talk about health, a healthy part of that, and even in wealth versus riches, like, everybody wants to make money, but wealth is a lot more dynamic than money. Wealth includes your health, includes your family, includes legacy, includes everything else. Riches come and go, money comes and goes. But if we're going to enjoy life, then we have to have a healthy mindset to do that. Like, we've got to start now. Like, whatever age you are, whatever you're doing, you got to pick out and say, I'm going to start living and loving my life now, not living and loving the life I'm going to have one day. And I think there's such,
I love that.
yeah,
I
yeah,
agree.
yeah. If we're always living in our future self, we'll never enjoy our present self. Let me just say that.
Yeah. And I want to give a big shout out to Tony Kitchens. Guys, if you don't know Tony, you need to get to know Tony. Tony, if you get a chance, drop your book link in. I still use your coffee cup every day. Tony, I love you, my brother. Thank you so much for hanging out. But, then again, I see a lot of young people. Like I said, I'm going to be 56 at the end of the month. So I'm in the second half of the football game.
Golden years.
But I'm still playing at a high level. But I hear a lot of young people say, I'm burnt out, but you haven't put in the work yet. Because a lot of people, whether it be in business, podcasting, whatever it is, they want to have all the riches, but they don't want to have to put in the work for it. Like for me, I've been doing this 12 years now. So I'm a 12-year overnight success. And like Ed Milet said in his latest book, you got to just put in the next rep. Just one more rep.
Just one more.
So talk about how important it is to, because I love the Bruce Lee quote. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. He said, I don't fear the man that can throw 10,000 kicks. I fear the man that did that one kick 10,000 times.
That wasn't paraphrasing. That was pretty good.
So talk to us about how important it is once you get out of the military to start focusing, because I love the word focus, follow one course until successful. So talk to us about the power of focus.
So the power of focus is incredible. I know you contexted this with, tell us when you get out of the military, but the trouble with that is if I'm focusing after I get out, I may be focusing a little late. So we need to start focusing right before we get out. And, because you have time and you want to put yourself in a direction. For years, and this is kind of where we can go with this. For years, I've had like this, I'm very lack of focus. I as a kid, I was diagnosed with, giftedness, and I have a mild ADHD. So my focus is all over the place. Like, there's days where I'm getting I'm getting on it. And there's days I feel like I'm a butterfly. I'm like, oh, but the reality of it is, what is built great is built with laser focus. Because if you build a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, you'll have a lot of half-finished products and nothing of significance. But if I can sit there and say, you know what, I'm going to focus on one thing until it's completed, until success, like you said, then I'm going to have that beautiful thing that is done. It's ready. It's moving forward, and it's going to be something of significance and lasting impact because it's done. And a lot of us who deal with the lack of focus or the chase of the squirrel or chasing the thing is we don't have anything that's going to be lasting, but we have a lot of unfinished products or unfinished things. And we're great at starting and terrible at finishing.
And I agree. That's one of and I was just praying about that this morning when I was cleaning the kitchen. I'm like, Lord, I know that's one of my downfalls. So please help me with that. Help me with the wisdom to finish what I start. Because I'll start a million different things and never finish any of them. So that's one thing I pray for. The only thing I pray for ever, I don't pray for things. I give thanks, and then I say, Lord, the only thing I ask is for wisdom. Because if I have wisdom, I can get the things. Right. But if I don't have wisdom, I can't do anything. So how important it is to, even in the Bible, it says to take inventory, when he was talking about starting a business. So how important is it to take inventory of where your life is before you can reimagine your life?
Oh my gosh, that should be one of the most important things. Whether it be the businesses I've started or the churches I ran or whatever, I have seen so many unhealthy people because they've never taken inventory. And quite frankly, the principle behind this is unhealthy things cannot produce healthy things.
Yeah.
Like a cancer cell cannot produce a clean cell. Like a cancer cell's job is to produce other cancer cells. Like you will produce what you are made of. So if you're unhealthy and you're mentoring people, they get who you are and all of the things that is inside of you. So if you're willing to push on your DNA as a leader into these young generations of mentoring and stuff, they're getting your unhealthy habits, your unhealthy attitudes about things. No matter how hard you try to hide them, they will see it. The same thing with your business. There's a feel and an energy that comes from your business that if you're unhealthy or you run it unhealthy, it doesn't matter what it looks like on the outside. People sense that. People feel that. And they will oftentimes stay away from that. So you should really at all times take monitored times throughout the year to take inventory of where are you in your health journey, mental, emotional, physical, all that stuff. Where are you in your health journey and where would you like to be?
And that is something that I do. Is like last year we went on 6 vacations and 2 cruises.
Nice.
I feel like when I go on a cruise, I don't call it a vacation. I call it a reset.
Yeah.
Because that's when I'm unplugged from social media for 8 days. I'm hanging out on the cruise ship. I'm enjoying my family. I'm being present. But then I'm like, wait a minute. This year I stayed in this room. Next year I want to stay in this room. So I'm going to hustle and grind my 180 days. So next year I can go and do this. And so when I come back, I have my whole list reset. I do a whole reset. And I think it's important for somebody to say, okay, if I'm going to take a vacation, make sure you just don't take a vacation and then come back and do the same stuff you were doing before.
Right.
That's just, that's just insanity. So talk about how important it is to have a reset at least once a year.
Oh gosh, you need to get away. You need to detox. You need to engage in the fun. One thing I heard one time, and I actually started doing it and modified it for my own life, is the guy, I think it was Jesse Itzler who said it, but he said, when you look at your calendar, prioritize the things you want first, not the work. The work will always be there, not the jobs, not the speaking engagement, but the fun that's going to fill you up. The one encounter this year that you want to go out and do, like if you want to go hike Yellowstone National Park, that's been a dream bucket list, and you want to do it this year, that is the first thing you put on your calendar. Everything else is built around it. And what we do is we build our calendar around everything else, and we happen to take a vacation. And we treat vacations as escape from our jobs instead of something that this is what my life is about. And my job is just going to be fueled to do the life that I want. And so we've got to change the way we look at it, because I don't go on vacations. I love, there's nothing wrong with it, people saying vacations, because I don't want to leave the life I'm building. Like I'm not trying to run away. I'm not just doing those things. But what I'm trying to do is I travel. I love, one of my heart things is I want to make sure that I put on my calendar is I love going to new places all the time. And I went on my first cruise. I loved it. Like I'm going to do another one soon. And it's so important because you've got to put on your calendar what's going to fill you up. And then around what fills you up, you can put what drains you. And that's going to be your business and everything else from people that want something from you.
And somebody, I wish I'm trying to remember his name and I can't. I've read over 6,000 books. I got 18 books going right now, plus 2 audio books, plus the course on LinkedIn. So I wish I could remember who the gentleman that said it. But he says, wealthy people focus on their wants.
Mm-hmm.
Poor people focus on their needs.
Yes.
And for me, it's like, okay, I believe that I'm a child of God. He's my father. He owns it all. Mm-hmm. So there's no reason I should be broke. There's no reason I should be poor. I believe that if he lets me borrow the house that I'm in now, he's going to let me borrow the beach house.
Right.
As long as I know that it's his. I don't own it. My father owns it. If he's going to let me borrow the Kia, he's going to let me borrow the new Corvette. As long as I know that it's his. It's not mine. It's all his. But I think that, when I think about that is I don't think about my needs anymore. I think about what my wants are, because whatever you train your mind on, and you use your reticular activating system, whatever you focus on, you're going to find. So if you're
Right.
only focusing on your needs, that's all you're going to do. But if you're focusing on your wants, you're going to take care of your wants and your needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I tell people when we talk about the whole conversation of broke versus poverty, right? Broke is a position, poverty is a mindset. Like my bank account may say zero, right? It doesn't right now, but if it did, so if my bank account may say zero, that's changeable. Your mindset is the poverty of living, like you're saying, you're like, I'm focusing on your wants. And I think that's a beautiful way to put that. The reality of it is getting into a place where you're saying, okay, what is my mindset? If your mindset isn't one of abundance, you will always go back to broke places.
I love it. Thank you, Tony, for dropping that. We appreciate you, brother. Okay, so let's talk about, because I know if me and you weren't friends, I think we're friends almost going on 7 years now.
Yeah, something like
Um,
that. Yeah.
I think I know for a fact I wouldn't be on your show. You wouldn't be on my show if we haven't built the friendship over these last 7 years. And I'm a big relationship guy. I
Mhm.
believe in generational relationships. And I think in order to be successful, in my opinion, anybody that's successful can't do it alone.
Right.
Like they say, if you want to run fast, run by yourself. If you want to run far, build your team. So
Hmm.
how important is, real relationships, personal relationships, but also in business, how not to be transactional in relationships either.
So that's a great question. And I think there's a couple ways to look at this. Number one is you have to have an inner circle. And the importance of your inner circle is, my gosh, and I know everybody out there who's been in leadership motivation has you are who you put around you. And yes, that is absolutely true. But I want to go beyond just the surface level of that, because then we become transactional. We're going, well, the people I want to be put around me are the people or the places I want to go. So if people are further along, they could be in my inner circle. But you know what I try to do too? I want people that are going to be around me that are going to actually be friends with me. They're
Yeah.
gonna be, yeah, they're gonna be at least equivalent from where I am or further
Yeah.
along than I am, but I wanna be friends. I want people who around me who are gonna call me out when I'm, on my nonsense. I want
Yeah.
people around me who are going to be, and it should be only like 3 to 5 people. I want people around me who are going to laugh with me, who are gonna send me memes because I talk like, my second language is memes. So, like, I want people to send me memes just because it's funny. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want somebody I can be with myself with, that I can take off the armor for a minute and not be judged for it. And so these are the inner circle, and the importance of that is you can't even describe the importance of that, because we don't have that. We live in a society that's untrusting. We live in a society that's super independent, and we're very, like, with all the trauma nowadays, there's a lot of manipulation, there's a lot of control, there's a lot of gaslighting, there's all this stuff. And so when you have that really close net people that, like in the military, that would die for you and you would die for them, and this is the life you're building, man, you find contentment, you find fulfillment, and it doesn't matter how successful or not, you're always going to have that success in that relationship, and it's going to be, I think, worth it. Secondly, in business, I think we have to make the demarcation between, in business, a lot of it will be transactional because you got people you want that want to buy from you. Like, that's a transactional. You can build a community, but even building a community, you're never going to be as vulnerable or as naked, right? As the Southerners, as naked in front of people, because that's the vulnerability, as you will with that inner circle. So you have to define what each relationship looks like. And you've got to define the level of relationship. And I think there's so many times where we get our fingers bit because we go from our inner circle type relationships out into the business world expecting the same thing. And it's not going to be. And so you've got to redefine what relationships look like for each arena you're in. And then here's the other thing that's not talked about. And I experienced this personally when I was pastoring. I went from being a youth pastor to a senior pastor. I was a church planner. And the people who went with me had to redefine the relationships based on the new role. So when you change or shift roles in people's lives, the entire relationship has to be redefined. Like, we oftentimes will assume that it doesn't matter because we're now positionally different, but it does matter psychologically to people. So they'll start to redefine relationships. And you've got to keep that cognizant, understanding that when the normal changes, all the relationships begin to shift, whether deeper or shallow, or leave or stay, new ones, whatever, that shifts. And in that, everything has to be redefined.
Okay, then, and I agree with that, and and I think you have, like The Rock says, you need to know your role.
Yeah.
But also, I think there's certain people in our group. I'm not going to call them out, but they're one way when the camera's off, and they're one way when the camera's on.
Yeah, that's a whole
When
different that's a whole different conversation about character, man.
when you see them in person, they're like totally not what you think. But like for me,
Yeah.
uh, I'm the same way on camera, the
Yeah.
way I am off camera. We ever get together, you're getting a big hug. That's
Mhm.
me. That's the way I rock. But how would it would look weird if one day you say, "Hey, Rich, come on down to Florida. We're going to go out for dinner." I show up, 3-piece suit, no hat, and start talk and start being really aloof. You're going to be like, "That's not the same dude." And I think that's where I think the more lifelike you really are,
Mhm.
the more business will come to you because people know. Well, I seen Rich at the restaurant the other night. He stopped by the table. We talked. I need something done to my. I need something done in my business. I'm going to talk to that guy because he's the
Right.
same way in business and out of business.
Mhm.
Because I've been in green rooms with some of the biggest speakers you'll ever want to meet. They act like they're the nicest people, but they're some of the biggest a-holes that you'll ever meet.
Oh
So
yeah.
talk about how it's okay to be vulnerable. But I believe I'm not weak. I believe in meekness. I'm meek. I'm like Jesus. I have power under control.
Right.
I can change my baby daughter's diaper, but I can also rip your throat out when I have to.
Right.
So talk about how important it is to not, if you're going to be an alpha male, be a humble male, alpha male.
Yeah, so you bring in some great conversational pieces about character, and a lot of that times when you see people one way and they show up a different way, that's a character issue. It's a character flaw. And quite frankly, I can't fix your character flaw. I can only accept it or choose to move on. And so, like, with that is, if you find those disconnects or the dissonance between who they show up to be and who they really are, then they don't need to be in your life like that. Like, move on. And so, like, I think the challenge is, though, again, is we get into these conversations when we're people, we'll get into these places where we idolize or we look up to the ideal version of them. And then when we actually get to meet them, we're basically punched in the face with reality. That I think that's where all that one statement came from. Never meet your celebrity crush because you'll be disappointed, or whatever it said. It's the truth. In as much is that we put our expectations so high because based on an ideal version they show us, that when we see who they really are, that's not who they are. And this comes back to social media, because here's the reality with social media. We're oftentimes comparing our internal behind the scenes to everybody's external, what they're showing us. And what causes people to stand out are the people that are saying, like you'll see a lot of my posts, I'm pretty transparent, like, yep, this is happening. Why? Because I want my externals and my internals to match.
Yep.
The challenges is with a lot of these guys where you're talking about alpha under humility versus just being a jerk. I don't even call them alphas, they're just jerks. But the reality is that their priority is money, and they'll do whatever they can to earn or get that money. And they don't care what you see, only what they want to show you. And I think that's a challenge with that. And that's not everybody, but that's a good bit of them, a good bit of what the gurus out there, where I think the ones that are standing out now are the ones that are saying, I'm a real person with real issues, and we can do life together because I have stuff that you need. I'm a little further along the journey. And so like when we get into those conversations, we really got to be honest with ourselves and say, what do I want? What do I want to accept in my life? And then move on from everything else.
And don't you agree that somebody may have been in your life for a season,
Mm-hmm.
but now they're not in your life for a reason?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because sometimes they're just in your life to learn a lesson. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes when we get hung up on people from the past, we can't really focus on the people that are in our present. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's two things with that. There are seasonal things. There are people in your season for a reason. I do think God allows that, whether good or bad. There are that, and then there are people in your life because you didn't have the courage to say no. And I think that's another level of that conversation, is because life comes down to choices, and there are times in our lives where God is like, "Don't go near that person," and we choose to go near that person anyway. Like we'll have seasonal, everything's a season, and we'll have friends that come in and friends that leave, seasons. We'll have people we interact with, good or bad, season comes, seasons goes. But I think there needs to be a newfound focus on the people that are in our lives currently, that have stayed in our lives because of the decisions we made, and that decisions were like not healthy to commit to begin with.
Okay, so and thank you, Jim, brother. I'm so grateful. I'm having such a good time. I just want to say thank you so much. I'm writing an article tomorrow an article for LinkedIn and for Fortune magazine, and the article is going to be leadership versus boss. So let's talk about leadership. I When I got pinned and I became a non-commissioned officer, I took that very seriously. I
Right.
took the NCO creed very seriously, and up to this day, I still take things leadership seriously. I won't eat until my wife and my kids are eating.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not eating, guess what? I'm not eating. I still
Mm-hmm.
make sure that even when we're walking to New York City, I'm walking behind them to make sure I got their six and they're safe. I'm always making sure that anybody around me, I make sure that they're safe before myself. And I think that is one thing that I love about leadership. But I also think, because I've seen a lot of people, some will say, well, I'm an influencer or I'm a leader. And somebody will ask me, well, Rich, you've got, hundreds of thousands of followers or whatever. Are you an influencer or a leader? I'm like, don't ask me. Ask the people, ask my friends, ask
Mm-hmm.
them if I'm a leader. Because if I have to say that I'm a leader, then I'm not a leader. If I have to say that I'm an influencer, then I'm not an influencer. So talk about the difference between being a leader and being a boss.
Okay, sure. So if you really want to get technical, we're all influencers. I mean, we really are, because I think that John Maxwell talked about the fact that even an introvert will influence over 100,000 people in their lives, right? We as a culture just coined the term influencer because somebody has a million followers and they're now an influencer. Yeah, we influence people every day. It's just what it is. We're all influencers on some level. Now, the boss versus the leader conversation gets into another level of just interesting conversational direction, because the boss is really a transactional thing. It's, I got a job, you're here to do the job, and that's it. Like there's not much more to the dynamics of a boss. It's, here it is, here's your role, do it, or I find somebody else to do it for you. That's it. Like I like simplicity. Where the leader is much more dynamic, it's, the leader is yes, they're concerned about the job, but the challenge with, not the challenge, but the directional of the leader is to focus on the greater vision. And you're a leader when you take people with you to that destination. Just because people follow you doesn't make you a leader. Like when I say follow, we're talking the social media followers. You're not a leader if you have a million followers. It's not leaders. Yeah, you're just influencing people. But a true leader is somebody who will, like, people will follow them based on, whatever, their character, their direction, the vision. And the leader's job is to take the entire group that says yes to them to the destination, and they all go together. Because if you go to the destination by yourself, you're not a leader. If you go to, because I think it was Confucius, it says if somebody is walking and nobody's following, they're not a leader. A leader by definition has to have people that follow them. Now, there are different types of leaders, and the most beneficial is a servant leader, which is a leader like you who is pushing them from behind, because you're in the trenches. You want to fight, you want to work, you want to do all the things with them because you're serving with them but you're also the guy who's leading them to the direction. That is a servant leader. This is the best type of leadership, because now you're building relationship along the way, you're building camaraderie, you're building, vulnerability, intimacy, and you're all going to the destination that you have said, hey, this is the best version, this is the best ideal that we want to get to. Let's all work together to get there. And that's really what I think is the difference.
And the funny thing is, like, I got promoted. A funny thing, I got promoted into motor pool to E5, and I'm still sweeping the motor pool like everybody else. Mm-hmm. When it's time to go home, I'm in there cleaning the shitters with them. I even had, this showed real leadership to me. I was an E5 buck sergeant, and it was Christmas time. And my first sergeant, he was single at the time. He came on my duty and said, "Why don't you go home to be with your family? Mm-hmm. I got this." So he played sergeant of the guard as a first sergeant, and let a young E5 go home to be with his family. And for me, from that day on, if he would have told me, go take that hill with nothing but an E-tool, I'm going to go take the hill with nothing but an E-tool. You know what I mean? Because and even my guys, I know when they're like, hey, Sarge, you don't have to worry about it. I'm like, guys, if you're breaking track, I'm breaking track with you. We work hard together, we party together. And, and I think, like you said, it's when you're a servant leader. Like it was Jesus that was washing the people's feet.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can even get into this with John Maxwell. John Maxwell puts out the level of leadership. First level is positional, second level is relational, third level is, and I get these two oftentimes confused, but is personal development, what you do for people. The next level is what you do for the organization, and then you get to the upper level, which is level 5, which is personhood. People follow you for what you stand for, and you go through these levels. And what that guy did for you was, he wasn't a positional guy. He moved quickly up to, what has he done for me personally? And that level 3, level 4 leader is a leader who now has people's hearts. And so this is where you'll follow him. You'd follow him anywhere, right? And that's the thing. And no doubt. And I think that even the people who have the platforms out there who are in the millions have the real beautiful ability to do something great and actually become leaders, if they can leverage it to a place where there's a commonality of direction. Like, there's some people out there that do beautiful jobs raising money for St. Jude's. They do beautiful jobs raising money for vets. Why? Because they mobilized as an influence their audience around a common purpose. And isn't that the definition of a leader? I mean, we're mobilizing people around a common purpose to a common destination. And so we just got to remember that. And stories like you're sharing, I think we need to tell more of those stories, because those people would never tell their own story. And if we're going to be people out there of any significance, of impact, then we've got to move into the place of leadership and move quickly beyond positional.
And I love that. And somebody asked me, how important is relationships are. And I'm like, if you say you're a leader, let me see your DMs. Because I know, if I see, if I'm on my Facebook page and I see Jim and his wife are having a birthday or whatever, instead of putting on their page oh my God, look at me, I posted on happy birthday, I'll actually go into your DMs and I'll be like, hey Jim, it's just me. I've seen your post. That's awesome. I'm so proud of you. What did you name the baby? Or stuff like that. And I think that stuff, when you're actually making it personal, is more important than just posting on somebody's page, hey, congratulations, or happy birthday. So talk about that. I believe the magic is in the DMs, as long as it's heartfelt and it's real and you're not trying to be transactional.
Yeah, so I think you could do DMs. I could even think you could do it on a post. I think it's more personal. It's like the old school getting a letter. Remember when we used to be so
Yeah.
excited when we actually got real mail and it was nice
Yep.
mail, it wasn't just junk mail. And so like I think DMs are now what would be equivalent to then back then of being not junk mail. However, even in DMs, there's this challenge because there's so many people trying to spam and sell and all that stuff. So when you show up and you're like, hey, I'm just thinking about you, or what I do often is, hey, I'm praying for you. I'll do that a lot. And it's just for me to say, hey, listen, I see you and I'm praying. And that's it. Nothing more than that. And I don't do that all the time. And I don't do that with a ton of people, because when you start getting into a ton of people, it becomes a full-time job. And that's not what I'm doing. But I'll take 2, 3, 4 people, 5 people a day, or, every few days, and I'll do that. And what I'm trying to just say is, it's not because I'm trying to position. It's not because I have intentions of being their leader, but I want to make sure that people understand that I care. And I think that's the level that we're missing a lot of times, especially in relationship, is that, hey, I may be successful, or I may be this, I may be that, but I still care. And you're in my circle. You're not just in the community, you're a little bit further in the circle, maybe we may be acquaintance friends. And I want to just say, hey, happy birthday, just something like that. So just happy birthday. Nothing more. I don't need to sell you anything. I don't need anything. I just care about your well-being. And I want you to know that I care about your well-being. Because I think there's an epidemic in this country that people, and when I lost my mom and my sister last year, both to cancer, I had a lot of people tell me after the fact, I meant to call you. And in my head, I'm like, you meant to call me, but while I was going through the worst time of my life, I never even knew if you were a friend, but you meant to call me. And I think when you get people who actually show up in your DM saying happy birthday or this, what you're doing is the equivalent of, I'm just not meaning to call you. I'm calling you to let you know I'm here.
And like for me, I get some people, I'll be like, hey, bro, I'm just thinking about you. You're on my heart. And they'll be like, Rich, did you get hacked? I'm like, no, this is me. Or they'll ask, or I'll say, hey, bro, or says, hey, just thinking about you, praying about you. Hope you're doing well. And then they're like, what do you want? I'm like, nothing. I just wanted to let you know that I'm praying for you. And people are like, wow, a lot of people don't get that anymore. So I think that's something that we really need to start doing again.
Yeah, we definitely do, because there's a level of mistrust. Everybody mistrusts everybody, and everybody thinks they're trying to sell everybody.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about podcasting, because now you are a podcaster. And what made you want to get into this crazy world of podcasting?
I talk a lot. So, hey, listen. So, like, I want to be first and foremost very transparent, very real. God has gifted me as a communicator, and I needed an outlet. So, podcasting and speaking are just 2 outlets to share how God's gifted me. That's really primary. So, another primary one is I just feel like there's an impact I want to make. And the best way to do is to tell stories, to share information. So I'm on YouTube and I'm podcasting as well. And so it's just for me to say, hey, listen, I do want to make an impact. I want to make your life 1% better every day. And so the content I share is to how to make your life better, and it's in the leadership and life mentorship kind of context. But the reality of it is, first and foremost, I just kind of laugh about it because I am a talker, and podcasting just seems like the perfect stage for me to go talk. And others want to listen. So that's a good thing. That matches up, right?
Yeah. So now you're what? The last time we talked, you're like 20 episodes in?
I just released episode 20 this week. Yep.
Damn, am I good, or do I pay attention?
You are. Or what? You do.
So what would you do different now than you would do from day one? What were some lessons you learned from episode 1 to episode 20?
All right. So I can give you a couple lessons. Number one, I wish I would have started 5 years ago when I wanted to do this. I shot myself in the foot. Like, I was like, man. Number two is the idealistic fear that I had, the perfectionistic things that I had at the time were not actually what happened. Like I had this mentality motif, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this because this was going to happen. And it never has happened. Like, I'm like, man, I was afraid for nothing, like nothing. Number three, I really focused in on the process. I said, you know what? Because I was living in a place of perfectionism in all as much as I didn't want to launch because I was afraid that it was just going to be terrible and that it was going to get worse and worse. But the opposite has been things. It's actually been pretty good and it's getting better and better. And here's another thing is in the podcasting field, which I wasn't really expecting, the people in the podcasting realm are so giving. It's insane.
Yeah.
I had 3 people and all 3 of them were this was episode 6, I think, at 6 or 7. All 3 of them had owned their own podcasting agencies. One of them had released 700-800 podcasts already at the time. And they said, hey, can I give you some advice? I was like, absolutely. And he gave me all 3 of them gave me some really actionable advice that I immediately put in episode 7. And I'm just like, man, had I known that people in this industry would be so willing to help and serve, I would have started a lot sooner. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
those are some things.
it's a community. That's why we
Yeah.
call the podcast community. Like, I actually teach a course on how to start your own podcast. I actually have books about it. But if somebody says, "Hey, I'd like to hop on a call. I got a question about something," sure, why
Yeah.
not? Because I believe the more good I put out in the world, the more it comes back to me. And the good thing is, like, I think we're up to episode 13, 60 or something.
Mhm.
I can just reach out and be like, all right, Robert Kiyosaki, I got a question, bro. Or David Meltzer, I got a question for you. Like, my wife was having a problem with, she was cooking an onion or something like that. She couldn't figure it out. And I'm like, hold on a minute. Picked up my phone, da, 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 da. And I go, like, here's the answer. She's like, who'd you get the answer from? I'm like, Iron Chef. Iron Chef Simon Majumjar said, you got to cut the onion this way. She's like, wait a minute. You reached out to an Iron Chef to
Yes.
to ask about an onion? I'm like, that's what friends do.
Yeah.
And that's what podcasting has afforded me, to be able to reach out to people like that, because it's a platform.
Mhm.
It is a platform where if you have a podcast, you're in media. People
Yes.
want to be on media. People love media. So eventually, people will be able to. I can't afford to sit in Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lecter's office for a couple hours to get tips, but they can come on my show for
Mhm.
free, and I can ask him anything I want about Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I can
That's
get
it.
all the answers I want. Have you found the same thing with your show?
I am finding very similar things, and I've had some really cool people on so far, you being one of them. And it's been really cool because I've really what I've noticed is that the show as the show is maturing, I'm starting to want to be more focused on certain things. Like one of the things that I've been focusing on since its inception has been the story behind the story, because I want to know the stories that nobody's talking about. What was it like growing what you have, like things like that. But now I'm also leaning into some more dynamics of, hey, well, while you were growing this, what were you thinking? So it's really like trying to figure out what people were thinking and feeling as they were building. So it's been really a really cool journey so far.
And you have an amazing podcast. You have an amazing setup, and I'm so proud of you. So this is a teaching podcast. So if I don't even know what the ranks in the Coast Guard are, but if there's some guy that's been in for 4 years, he's in 3 years, he's got a year to get out. What would
Mhm.
be your top 3 pieces of advice how to make it transition into the civilian sector? What would be your top 3 pieces of advice for that person?
Don't wait until the last month to decide where you want to go or what you want to do. If you got a year, start now. Basically, figure out what kind of job you want to do, figure out where you want to live, what part of the world. Number two, I would say, as you get closer, start applying early. And when I mean early, I don't mean like a year ahead of time. I mean like within a month or two, with the letting them know in a month I'm getting out and this is where I'm coming, because you don't want to actually get out and then have nothing to go to. So as you go, so map it out, start saying, okay, this is the industry I want to work in. This is the place I want to live. Now where do the two combine so that I can start, applying, mapping it out, all those things. And also you really want to talk about or think about too in the mix of that, not just what you want to do or where you want to live, but who do you want to do it with? Like a lot of guys in the military, they start out, single and they end up married before they're out. And so or they get married shortly when they're out because they get lonely and things like that happen. Or they find the love of their life and they want to get married. So now you've got to add the additional things. So don't just look for work and a place to live for work, but look into a place that you can build a life where you have a significant other, where you're going to have kids one day. And so if I wish somebody would have said to me, I moved, as soon as I got out, I moved from Tennessee to Georgia. I got out in Tennessee and then I moved to Georgia. Had I known what I know now, I would have probably stayed in Tennessee because I love Tennessee. I've been in Florida for 20 years now, but I love Tennessee. And I would have probably started buying a whole bunch of land and doing what I'm trying to do now. I would have started back then. And so one of the considerations you're going to want to do is, where do you want to build a life? Like, what's your long-term goals? Do you want a ranch? Do you want to live in a penthouse in New York City? Consider that when you start looking for the other things too.
All right. So how do we find you? What's the name of your podcast? How do we get in your ecosystem?
All right. So how do you find me? I am on pretty much most of the socials at Lead with Jim. And it's just like that. So on YouTube, at Lead with Jim, Instagram, kind of playing with Instagram, but Facebook, particularly Lead with Jim. My podcast is called Grace in the Grind. You can find that on Spotify and Apple and on my YouTube channel as well. And then I will be starting a secondary podcast called The Art of Peopling that will come out in February on the anniversary of my sister's birthday. We lost her last year. So we're going to start that in February. So you can look at me on Spotify, Apple as well, and YouTube. And then what I'll do is I will send you a link, Richard, that goes to, I think it's leadwithjim.com. And that'll go to a free gift for your audience it's a short ebook on, I think it's 19 affirmation statements, winners. I call it Winners Win. And really it is going to be just devoted to here's some really cool portable truths that you can start using and applying in your life to start creating a winner's mindset.
I love that. Thank you. Now, that's normally the last question, but because it's you, I got one more question.
Sure.
When I had Simon and Majumdar, Iron Chef, on, he said because of COVID, we lost over 100,000 restaurants. And that means there's a lot of people driving for Uber, DoorDash. So if I ask a listener to do something in 7 days, they're never going to get to it. But if I ask them to take an actionable step in the next 24 hours, they're more likely. So my question to you is, if somebody is struggling with their faith, what is something they can do in the next 24 hours to find some peace and to get back close with him? Because I believe that if you're not close to God, you're the one that moved. He's always there for you. So what would be your advice if they want to do something in the next 24 hours to finally get some peace?
Open your Bible. So, and I say that it's very fast because there's a few reasons, but open your Bible, read the book of John more than anything else if you're going to start, if you're in a struggle. Now, obviously, there are scriptures that speak to different struggles, but the book of John really focuses on God, Jesus as God himself. This is where the focus is. And why I say that is we usually will get into things of trying to find people, trying to find, praying, but quite frankly, there's so many people out there that have so many weird thoughts about what spirituality and faith is, that for the Christian, we just open our Bible and we get back to where God talks to us the most. And there's been studies done actually that if you read your Bible, the more you read your Bible in a week, the less depression you have, the less anxiety you have. I mean, it's a cool study. But the reality is, if you're finding yourself far from God, if you're finding yourself struggling with God, go to the source material, go to the Bible, and then from the Bible, start asking trusted people who are believers and have a growing relationship with Christ. Start getting wisdom from them. But first and foremost, open your Bible and do it soon. Don't let the thing collect dust. Too many people who say they're Christian never open their Bible. And I think that's the problem why they don't understand who Jesus is and how he operates in this world.
And I love that. And I love the quote that if you see a man with the Bible that's falling apart, his life is probably not.
Yep, absolutely.
So guys, make sure you check out all the websites. I'm following him everywhere on all social media. So make sure you follow Jim. And guys, remember, like I say when I close every episode, I'm a big Joel Osteen guy, and I believe that when he said, every morning we wake up, we can choose to be a victim, or we can choose to be a victor. And if you guys listen to this show, you're no longer victims of your past, but you're victors of your present and your future. So thank you guys for always showing up. Jim, my brother, I'm so grateful and humbled to be able to hang out with you today. I love you and your bride, and I'm so grateful for your friendship.
I'm grateful too, man. The honor's all mine. You are a stellar individual, an incredible character, doing great things. And I hope to be like you one day when I grow up, man.
I love it. Tony, thank you so much for hanging out all day. We need to catch up. I would love to get you coming on the show. Love you, Tony. And guys, remember, vertical momentum. The only way to go is up. I love you guys. Have a great week. My brother, have an awesome week.
You too, sir.